Choose a Gentle Winding Path, an essay on ethical choice, Part 1 by Marty Price, copyright 2022. Chapter 1, an introduction. Just as Thoreau wandered off, according to his own claim, to examine the value of life, or perhaps as Melville suggested, some of us fall into ruminations rather like a dyspeptic whale, I've decided to think through and record my ideas of what constitutes an ethically responsible life. Whale vomit, ambergris, was once the base for fine perfume. I would be delighted if one or two of my words were worth so much. My only hope is that they prove a bit deeper than commonplaces in chicken soup. I'm the sort who spends time, whether or not productive, on thought and personal reflection. It has occurred to me to gather, in some systematic notion, my own ethical philosophy. I do so because I am both an individual and a constituent element of this universe, the planet we call Earth, and my own society. Because I have some personal and eccentric, but general systematic, ideas regarding my place in society, on this Earth, in this universe, and in whatever realms may lie beyond or we may dream so does. Because I've read enough and studied enough to imagine my words are not the mere product of my own ego, and because I am deeply committed to forwarding to those who might hear me some fundamental notion of human optimism, some measured and careful idea that all life, including human life, is possessed of some integral value. I want to say that we, our lives, and the universe in which we live matter. What constitutes a systematic inquiry into ethical thought? My own rules include: a genuine ethical theory must be applicable or adaptable to persons of the widest possible range of religious belief or unbelief. It must aspire to universality. A genuine ethical system must be based in and developed through reason, must aspire to standards of rational observation and logical development. A genuine ethical inquiry must acknowledge both the individual and the individuality of others. It must aspire to universal empathy. An honest ethical system must acknowledge that we are, by nature, social creatures, and must aspire to understand our role both as individuals and as members of society. I should begin by acknowledging something of my own fundamental assumptions. I speak from my own perspective, and am well aware I hold personal notions which others may not share. I begin with the simple claim that I am possessed of an immortal soul. Have I proof? None. It is a fundamental intuition, a claim that the center of I has some reality beyond the functional attributes of mind and the physical attributes of body. That is, we are something more than a computer with an operating program, to use a somewhat dated metaphor. This soul, this element of self, gives cohesion to the particular mind and body I now inhabit, and carried out a similar role, I would merely guess, in other lives in previous incarnations, and I will take on further identities in future incarnations. This is speculation. Pure speculation. Mind you, this is me and personal. In most areas of applied ethics, such points scarcely matter, so I will ask patience from any readers who are chuckling at my mystical bent. I do have a soul does matter, but not so much in terms of my identity as in terms of my responsibilities, my relationships with the rest of this universe, or the bits of it with which I interact. If I have a soul, and it occupies its given place in this physical world, it logically follows that creatures with bodies and minds like my own are likewise possessed of souls. I should be able to, with little difficulty, Assume that other members of the human species are likewise mind, body, and soul. Other mammals? Almost certainly, as the internal mix of instinct, emotion, and thought in my dog and myself differ in measure rather than in fundamental form. Likewise, that other standard domestic companion, the cat, whose behavioral qualities are, admittedly, significantly different from mine or my dog's. What about other animals? It becomes difficult, without indulging in unjustifiable anthropomorphism, to locate human qualities in a monitor lizard. However, the monitor lizard does possess individuality, so I see no justification to deem it soulless, though I would find its mind a buzz of appetites and instincts, and, to my knowledge, would be unable to locate any higher values there. A tree? It is alive. I know not how plants think, but there is evidence that they do. A star, alive in active nature and internal revolution, or evolution, excuse me. A planet, regarding a chunk of rock like Mercury, by my standards it might be hard to say. However, Mars, Jupiter, and such, geologically active, each in its way is alive as this planet Earth. So for all these living beings I have obligations, obligations discernible by my own desires. Do I desire to be treated with respect? Do I desire the opportunity for self-actualization, the pursuit of happiness it has been labeled? Do I desire life? Do I desire the opportunity to fill my role in the vast connected universe? My answer to all these questions is yes. I, therefore, am obliged to treat others, those which have, or could have, souls as I desire to be treated, that is, with respect for their own individuality and designs. It is here that the complexity of ethics begins. I can look at other human beings and find manual categorical imperatives staring at me. Treat others always as ends, never as means. John Donne can remind me, no man is an island. I can waver at the questions of the required, the desirable, and the possible, and in the following pages I intend to do so. But as I accept all the universe as alive and conceived to so much the possession of individual souls, I must conclude that my standards for creatures outside my species must be different from those of my own. Otherwise, eating a peach would be as much an act of cannibalism as eating my neighbor's liver. Since I cannot affect, beyond that bit ordained by gravity, the life of the sun or any neighboring star, I would start measuring my ethical obligations with my treatment of the planet Earth. Within its confines, almost everything I could do on the planet would likewise be measured in terms of its effect on the individual entities, or groups thereof, who call the planet home. Most of the precepts regarding the planet should be categorized as ecological and environmental awareness. Some are, or should be, simple enough. Do not engage in wanton destruction, do not waste resources, respect and care for beautiful things. Measure carefully before undertaking projects for one's own benefit that extends general harm to the earth or any portions of it. In honesty, our minds and furnaces are requisite to the lives we lead and the beautiful things we have created. But our ecological footprint could and should be one of gentle steps instead of grinding boot heels. Every species leaves its footprint, and ours does reshape the earth. We've made much that is good and much that is beautiful. From the window of a plane flying over the American Midwest, I can see the neat squares of varying shades of green, measured off by generations of farmers, and created initially by the early survey grids that apportioned homesteads. If, Likewise, in a plane, I approach a city by night, I can see the sparkling diamonds of the various forms of artificial life. I can also, if I know how, observe deer trails in the Appalachians. In Africa, I can see the paths created by elephants. Creatures, not just humans, affect their environments and sometimes create things beautiful or useful. We have perpetrated great harms upon the planet and its occupants. I could, in the same fashion, ride a plane over certain sections of Appalachia scarred by mountaintop mining. I could visit the slag heaps still visible in western Pennsylvania. I could visit ruins in Detroit. The gigantic Packard plant is, particularly visible. Or to any other similar city, find them rather less artistic and appetizing than the stone ruins of forgotten cities edging the Sahara. We have destroyed things of wondrous beauty and have created long-lasting dumps and waste piles. Ethically, we should work to become better at creating the good and the beautiful, to effect less damage to our world, and to create the natural beauty, to treat the natural beauties of the planet and the creations of its other inhabitants with respect. And we should, metaphorically, clean our rooms. We should not convert portions of the planet into dumps and trash heaps. Many ecological questions are matters of measure and choice. I can look at very, very poor choices. In the latter 19th and early 20th century, America discovered ideas of mass transit. The country built, inefficiently, for the building lined the pockets of a generation of robber barons, a network of long-distance transit, the rail system. Local transit, wonderfully efficient streetcars and trolleys that utilized our developing electrical system, were employed in cities large and small. Then, powered by economic influence, an illogical anti-streetcar fashion took form. Cities moved from relatively energy-clean streetcars to buses that ran on lead-enhanced gasoline. Tracks were uprooted. Pieces of lines were sold off to individuals to be built upon, with the design that the streetcars might never run again. Mass transit as a concept was assaulted because Detroit, the name used to label automotive interests, wished to sell more and more individual passenger cars. Our TV sets spouted programs financed by advertisers from Detroit. The individual motor car was suggested as the only way to travel, or the only way aside from expensive, luxurious air travel. More commuters drove cars, congesting cities. Rail lines, the means of long-distance travel, were neglected as better, faster highways were built. Integrally inefficient highways. A train could comfortably carry so many more people than cars, and could do so without the dangers of seatbeltless motor cars of the day. Trains were operated by skilled engineers and rode rails that could be designed for near-perfect safety. Could, at least. Automobiles, which had to be steered carefully over highways of mixed quality, were operated by individual drivers, skilled, incompetent, attentive, drunk, distracted. Rail lines fell into neglect, and more great trucks, vehicles designed to carry heavy loads over the highways, replaced them. Efficiency was compromised. Safety was compromised. Ecologically, macroeconomically, the change was idiotic. However, highways were subsidized, built by government entities. Rail lines, initially built with government subsidies, were neglected so that they could not effectively economically compete. As it became impossible to direct all travelers onto our highways, air travel as a means of long-distance travel came fully into fashion. It became a commonplace necessity instead of a luxury, and with that change, While the intense ecological footprint of air travel remained, the trips themselves ceased to be pleasure. Sterile and overcrowded terminals funnel passengers onto cramped and comfortless planes. The result is neither good, nor efficient, nor ecologically sound. In the third regard, policies creating our current travel systems are obviously ethically lacking. But what about the rest? Does the whole cauldron of ugliness not rest on choosing mammon, money, over human values of quality and comfort? Was selling our collective souls to Detroit an unethical choice? Yes. The creation of unsafe highways shows neglect for the lives of others. The motive for the shift in priorities, profits for Detroit, exemplify treating others, the citizens of the United States, as mere means to an end, people to be used in the gathering of money. The right to time was abused as traffic jams made human life less efficient. The landscape was littered with junkyards, as automobiles were run for a few years and cast aside. Deliberate shoddiness in construction, as well as passionate advertising for changing fashion, created ever-recurring demand and less scrap automobiles everywhere. Workers were abused. Despite the high pay in the steel industry and auto industry, workers were exposed to danger, long-term health risks, and the like, and the environment was abused. From the ecological harm inherent in burning such quantities of fossil fuels to the specific release of poisons onto the air. Lead in gasoline was generally sold into the middle of the 1970s. Yes, the post-World War II American economy rested on ecologically unsound, unsustainable, and honestly harmful bases. Bases voluntarily assumed and based on unethical priorities, a commitment to mammon instead of humanity. The American love affair with the automobile serves as a clear example of social irresponsibility. Doubtless, other societies have been confronted with, and similarly made, choices that were both ethically and pragmatically flawed over the course of history. Careful study of history might result in lists of these bad choices and societies thereby damaged or destroyed. However, one particular bad choice or ill-conceived human direction stands above all. One particular direction of social behavior bears no excuse. Yet most of us cannot or will not imagine a world without it. Imagine a world which has chosen no more war. Speaking in this segment merely of ecological consequences, there is no excuse for the destruction and waste occasioned by warfare. We've sown swaths of the planet with landmines, rendered great pastures death traps for any members of any large species we count there that wanders there. We have salted nuclear testing grounds with radioactive dust, poisoned water supplies, tormented the denizens of the ocean with our pinging sonar, dropped bombs on innocent whales we mistook for submarines, and destroyed beautiful cathedrals and great stone cities, our own creations, with our bombs, and so much more. We have done immeasurable violence to the best of ourselves, as well as things beautiful and places fertile as they naturally appear on this earth, to no purpose at all. War does nothing but destroy. Very few species, chimpanzees, and some insects, if in this context insect battles count, wage war. Yes, many creatures squabble over territories, but war, real war, is for us and the chimps, and we alone have raised war to a perverse art. We can behave otherwise. We study ethics because destiny is not written in our instincts and our genes. We study ethics because we can overcome our destructive dispositions, because we are creatures capable of measure, empathy, and choice. We can abandon our habit of waging war. If our species is to long survive, it must abandon our habit of waging war, for we have built weapons enough to destroy the planet. Chapter 3. My Philosophical Bases. Self, society, and the earth with which we share with myriad other living beings and the starry heavens. My opening chapters suggested we do not have many worries regarding the starry heavens, and touched on some of our concerns with planet Earth. It is within our relations with society that we give purpose to our little lives. I deem our lives purposeful. It is a religious assumption, and a rather peculiar one in that I will define both purpose and my own beliefs in the vaguest of terms. The key word might be assumption. In some element, we, all of us born after the calamitous first half of the 20th century, are existentialists. That is, most of us accept and admit that our understanding contains subjective elements. We rely on intuitions we cannot prove, skepticism we have better sense than to fully live by, adherence to scientific ideas that, if really pressed, we should admit at least require assuming that we are living in a physical world rather than suffering an unpleasant dream. The best of us find such roots for our lives and thereby choose from the many rational or nearly rational approaches to an existence we have been blessed or cursed with the ability to ponder. The rest, those not the best of us, rely on dogma, ego, superstition, the naivete of a 3-year-old, or even the solipsism of a 3-year-old. I'm very fond of the best of us. I have a wide range of beliefs or rationales for unbelief, and many of whom likely consider my mystical notions flaky. I'm frightened by the worst of us, I think with very good reason. First, to establish common territory with the best of us, I state categorically, I fully accept the methodology of good science and the valid theories produced thereby. A scientific theory, for those whose knowledge of the term has been polluted by the many who popularly refer to hypotheses as theories. Theory, a falsifiable claim which has been tested and demonstrated accurate and corresponding to the best available current knowledge, things like the law of universal gravitation. Unless one believes this world is either an illusion or the product of the irrational dreams of a crazed demon, one must accept the validity of scientific knowledge. Ethical behavior, as I will attempt to establish throughout, is rational behavior, based on, for many of us, certain presuppositions, but always concerned with real-world consequences and cognizant of real-world circumstances. Destroying the lives of others, human or animal, whether in ritual blood sacrifice or in the name of conformity with one's own beliefs, is not ethical. Neither are the many gestures by which fundamentalists and fanatics attempt to advance their notions to the detriment of the freedom and dignity of others. Thus, my elevation of the central precept offered by Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant, a very rational perspective, rooted in his religious faith, yet easily adapted to the faith of any reasonable believer or idealistic unbeliever. Treat others always as ends, never as means. He termed this the categorical imperative. To explain, each of us is a unique individual, capable of independent action and entitled to life, freedom, and personal dignity. It is It's the obligation of each of us to treat all others in accord with those principles. Not only must one not kill, but one must not enslave, exploit, deceive, or in any way violate the autonomy of another. As an example, let me mention one current concern regarding that. One must not violate the sexual autonomy of another human being. Respect each individual's body, their choices, and their privacy. Ideally. Kant said always. It is categorical. Let me be honest, always is impossible. My bus driver is for me a means to get to a place. I can, should, and must treat the bus driver with dignity and respect. But few of us can exchange goods and services without any exploitive elements. The circumstances of my driver's employment may not always be fair. Our social interactions should, ideally, always be ethically positive. Can they be perfect? I think not. Are there inherent conflicts in our social interactions? Sometimes. Will conditions of employment too often be far nastier than my bus driver's battle with a migraine on a work day? Some of our jobs kill us. Those that leave workers smothering with black lung are an example. Should workers have to suffer such conditions? Of course not. How do we end the exploitation of such workers? The question just became harder. I cannot declare I will immediately cease my exploitation of fellow humans. I'd be left to step out into the world naked and wait to die of starvation or exposure. So, how do we live in a morally compromised world? I have no easy answers. We can and must